VaticanCatholic.com. I want to talk about a book called Our Lady of Guadalupe and the Conquest of Darkness. It's a book published by Christendom Press and written by Warren H. Carroll, and it tells the amazing story of the spiritual and the physical conquest of the Aztec Empire in Mexico. While I obviously cannot endorse everything Warren H. Carroll has said in his books, I think that this book is one of the best books I've ever read. I recently reread the book. It's quite short, actually, and most of it deals with the period prior to Our Lady of Guadalupe's appearance in 1531 and how Cortez and his fellow Spanish conquistadors overthrew the Aztec Empire. And what's so fascinating about this story is not only to read about the odds that they overcame in overthrowing this empire, but the demonic culture that was entrenched in the worship of the Aztecs. The Aztec Empire might have been the most wicked culture in human history. As Carroll points out on page 8 of his book, he says, quote, "Many primitive peoples have practiced occasional human sacrifice, and some have practiced cannibalism. None has ever done so on a scale remotely approaching that of the Aztecs." End quote. It's also extremely interesting that the serpent was a symbol used all over the Aztec Empire and in every aspect of their formalized worship. The center of their primary temple, where they conducted the most elaborate and massive human sacrifices imaginable, was enclosed by a wall that was called the Serpent Wall. As they were tearing the hearts from their victims as they sacrificed them, their aides would play sounds on snake skin drums. You would hear this sound in the background as people were being sacrificed and led into the temple to be sacrificed. Their temples were covered with images of snakes. One of their primary idols had many devil-like figures near his body with serpent-like tails. It's also interesting, and we've pointed this out on our website, that their idols were hideous and monstrous and extremely disturbing to any normal person. Many of them were pictured committing acts of sodomy with each other, another indication and proof that homosexuality springs from demonic possession, as Romans 1 teaches. One of the most important places that the emperor used was called the House of the Serpent, and I could go on and on. And the reason I mention this is because we see this also in the pagan religions of the East as well. We see the serpent intertwined with their false religions. And this is very important because we know from the book of Genesis that the original rebellion against God was instigated by the serpent, which represents the devil. The fact that all of these cultures so formalize the use of the serpent is a physical representation that they are thoroughly demonic and belong completely to the devil, pointing us back to the truth of 1 Corinthians 10:20, Psalm 95:5, that the gods of these false religions are devils. The two towers near their main temple were constructed of mortar and human skulls. The walls, the benches, the steps were made out of skulls. Just based on the skulls that the Spaniards saw near the temple, they were able to calculate that there were at least hundreds of thousands just in the number of those that they saw. Each city had a large town and a temple where they would conduct these human sacrifices. Starting on page 8 of his book, Carroll explains how it worked. He says, quote, "Every Aztec city and large town had a central square from which a high pyramidal temple rose. Month after month, year after year, in temple after temple, the sacrificial victims came down the roads to the steps, and there were bent backwards over large convex slabs of polished stone. An immense knife with a blade of midnight black volcanic glass rose and fell, cutting the victim open, His heart was torn out while still beating, and held up for all to see, while his ravaged body was kicked over the edge of the temple platform, where it bounced and slithered in obscene contortions down the steps to the bottom 100 feet below. End quote. So you had the cities and the temple itself constructed in such a way so that all of the other people could see exactly what was happening. They could see the rows of people being led into the temple to be sacrificed. They could see them being sacrificed with their hearts being ripped out while it was still beating. They could see them being kicked over the edge of the platform and bouncing down to the bottom. It was a scene meant to elicit horror and fear. It was truly the kingdom of the devil and death. In fact, Carroll tells the story of the 1487 dedication of the new Aztec temple, and more than 80,000 people were killed for 4 days and 4 nights. They continuously killed so many people that they had to utilize teams of priests who would take over for the priests who grew tired of the killing. Not tired as in physically repulsed, but tired as in worn out. On page 10, he quotes another author who describes it. Quote, legionnaires prepared the victims who were put in close single file down the steps of the Great Pyramid, through the city, out over the causeways, and as far as the eye could see. For the average person viewing the spectacle from his rooftop, it would appear that the victims stretched in lines to the ends of the earth. The lines of victims were strung out for miles, thousands of trapped humans milling about like cattle, awaiting their turn in the line that was about to move. Suddenly the brilliantly arrayed kings appeared on the platform, and silence fell over the city. Together they approached Huitzilopochtli's chapel and made reverent obeisance. As they turned to join their aides at the four slabs, great snakeskin drums began to throb, announcing that the lines could now begin to move. End quote. This period of human history is simply awe-striking for a number of reasons. Not only did you have the clash of two alien civilizations, and in fact, really alien worlds, because the New World was just being discovered. The Indians on the American continent, almost all of them had never seen or heard of Europeans. Some of them believed that the Europeans were in fact from another world and even gods. The Europeans were discovering this new world with its incredible natural beauty, expanse, and treasure. But at the same time, they were coming upon this people that seemed almost to be from the underworld, because they were thoroughly controlled by the devil. It must have been a striking experience for the Catholic Christians from Spain, who, while not all of them, of course, were of the highest moral standard, many of them did believe in the truth of Christ and accepted the fact that those who are outside of him are in darkness. It must have been amazing for them to come upon this people which so strikingly confirmed that truth and lived in an entire kingdom dedicated to the devil's reign. And it's fascinating that some of the main battles were fought by the conquistadors for control of the demonic temple and the area where their main devil god had his shrine located. And they would overthrow the image, and they would have to fight their way up the steps of the temple. And the people on the outside could actually see this battle occurring between the Catholics and the devil-worshipping Aztecs. So you had this situation where the physical battle was occurring for control of the temple, and it represented the spiritual battle between Christ and the hummingbird wizard, which is the name of the Aztecs' devil god. And Carroll does an excellent job of explaining how these two realities were intertwined. And I believe that the level of evil present in the Aztec Empire is one of the reasons why the miracle of Guadalupe was so prodigious and the image so amazing and miraculous. It was almost to counteract the level of evil that existed in this land prior to her appearance. But all of this physical conquest, which obviously was involved in a spiritual takeover of the evil empire, was necessary prior to Our Lady's appearance. And there's an interesting quote in the book Cortez by Richard Lee Marks, a historian, where he speaks of one of the battles that Cortez had in the lands leading into Mexico before he got there. And as they were using their horses to take out many of the Indians, he says, quote, "The Indians who prided themselves on being fast runners were dismayed when their fastest runners were overtaken by the horses and speared. Shocked and deafened by the Spaniards' guns, the Indians were panicked by the strange animals. They had never before seen horses, with or without men upon them, and they thought that each horse and rider were one creature, a kind of centaur dragon unloosed to destroy them." End quote.
Okay, we're all set. Let's begin then. They just came out of the Ottoman Empire, 8 centuries of invasion by Moors, with Islam ruling over Spain. They just kicked them out. The economy is completely shot. There's a lot of people who have lost their livelihood, who have lost everything, and their only hope is in the new world. The stories, the streets are paved with gold, all of that mentality, a lot of them with nothing else to lose, decide to come to America and be part of the conquering forces. So when Hernan Cortés is kicked out in 1519, he spends 2 years rallying everyone who was against the Aztec Empire, particularly is welcomed by the 4 lords of Tlaxcala. The 4 rulers convert. They're baptized, and from there, their entire households and the people that they ruled over, they convert. So they are the first ones to help the Spanish. So it was just a handful of Spaniards that came. They would have not been able to conquer the Aztecs by themselves. So 200, 300 Spanish soldiers would not be able to conquer 200,000 Aztecs. Of course, they were slightly diminished by the disease, by the pox. That helped also. When they came, they finally attack Tenochtitlan, the Aztec city on the lake, and they begin, finally, when they conquer, August 13, 1521, the feast day of St. Hippolytus. When they finally conquer, they begin to destroy. The very first thing they destroy are the pyramids, the temples, the idols. Get rid of those things. Huitzilopochtli, the hummingbird god, becomes Huitzilopochtli, something like a wolfman. That in their mind, that's how they see him. And then Tlaloc, the god of rain, is somewhat of a vampire, bad-looking god. So that is their vision on the gods of the Aztecs. They believe that they are demons, that they need to be exorcised. So they're returning the land back to God by the destruction of the pyramids and the destruction of all the statues. They believe that the natives are, that they were creatures. They don't have a soul. They're creatures of the devil. The Franciscans, thank God for the Franciscans. The Franciscans have the philosophy and the theology of brother, sun, sister, moon. St. Francis followed all creation is good because it is created by God. The devil is incapable of creation because the act of creation is something that takes out of you. It's generosity. And that the devil is incapable of doing. Something out of himself. So these people had been led astray by the devil, the snake. That is theologically acceptable, but not that they're not human. So they began to convert the first ones, the first natives who would accept Christianity. They would baptize them. And the conquerors, the actual militia, didn't like that, because they had lost everything back home, and now they're getting some land, they're getting the gold from the property of the natives, they're using them and abusing them. And if they are baptized, then I have to acknowledge them as my brothers. I have to be Christian to them. And that's not acceptable in many ways. So they actually start fighting against the friars, against the priests, so that they would not baptize them. Then the natives, in that part, in their group, the natives are actually outraged that there would be natives converting, because they're abandoning their gods. The world's coming to an end. So they are actually attacking the converts, and they're attacking the priests who are converting them, who are baptizing them. And they're attacking the militia, they're attacking the conquerors, who are destroying their temples. So we have Indians against Indians, Spanish against Spanish, Spanish against Indians, and Indians against Spanish. Did I miss anyone? So, in the middle of all of this, a Franciscan friar is sent over as bishop, Fray Juan de Zumárraga. And he finds that they're all destroying everything. They're burning down all of the gods. They're destroying everything they can find with that. And he's sent to bring sort of order, some sort of order into the land. The Franciscans built the first churches out of the pyramids with the same stone as the pyramids. This is the Church of the Holy Cross. The School of the Holy Cross, the Church of St. James. The School of the Holy Cross, where they first begin to learn from the Indians and they begin to teach them as well. There was the first exchange. The Bishop Juan de Zumárraga is sent, and he sees everything that's happening. He is pro-baptizing. He is also in favor of evangelizing the natives and accepting them into the church as humans. So there is an attempt made on his life as well. They're trying to kill him as well. So he writes a letter to the King of Spain saying, if there is no divine intervention, the land is to be lost. This is about to go, everything here is about to go into absolute chaos. I cannot control this. The feast day of the Immaculate Conception comes. He is a Franciscan. They have the Immaculate Conception as their patroness. So he prays to God. He prays to our Blessed Mother for help. He sees that everything is beyond his control. So he asks our Blessed Mother to help. And then he goes to bed. Next day, from Tepeyac, a native Indian by the name of Juan Diego, originally from Cuautitlan. He was born in Cuautitlan. He lived in Tepeyac. He would go to Tlatelolco to attend catechesis and mass. In order to go from the dry land to Tlatelolco, you have to go through a causeway. It's an island in the middle of the lake. So you have to go through a causeway. To get to that causeway from Tepeyac, you have to go by all of this mountain range. It would take him roughly about 4 hours. Anyway, so he would go on this, okay, just to give you an idea of the distances. So Juan Diego's going, and when he gets on Tepeyac hill, suddenly he sees a bright light shining from above. And the birds start singing. He thinks, okay, I'm dead and I'm in paradise. This is the paradise of my ancestors. What he's referring to is the second underworld, paradise on earth, where flowers blossom, birds sing. It's all joy and happiness. It's all the beauty. So suddenly the birds stop singing and the hill begins to answer the song of the birds. And then he says, okay, I'm really dead. I have to be. I mean, I get the birds singing. The hill? Come on. Anyway, the hill answers back, and then there's silence. And he hears a voice calling him. Juanito, Juan Dieguito. Actually, it was Juan Diegotzin. She speaks in Nahuatl. Okay, she speaks to him. Juan Diego spoke no Spanish. So he goes to the top of the hill and he finds a woman, 15, 16-year-old young woman. I don't know anymore what to call them. With this whole political correctness, you got me going mad. Anyway, young woman. He sees a 15, 16-year-old who tells him, I am the ever-Virgin Mary, mother of the one true God for whom one lives. I wish to have a house, church, built in this place, where I will show him, I will make him manifest. There I will give him to you, and I will remain and give all my love, mercy, and compassion to all of my children united in this land. This is actually the short version of the message. It's pure poetry. It's absolutely exquisite. Get a hold of the Nikan Nopoa. You will enjoy it enormously. It's beautiful. So Juan Diego's off to see the bishop. Our Lady tells him, tell the bishop everything that you see and hear. Off goes Juan Diego and gets to see the bishop. And he starts telling him about the bird singing and the hill singing, and there's a light before sunrise and the lady in the top of the hill. And the bishop just looks at him and obviously doesn't believe a word he's saying. Diego's devastated at the fact that the bishop doesn't believe him. So he goes back to our Blessed Mother and tells her, please send someone else. Send a Spaniard, send a priest, send someone with hierarchy. I'm nothing. I'm the bottom of the ladder. I'm the end of the rope. I'm nothing. I'm the end of the wing. Me capal. I'm nothing. So Our Lady tells him, no, it has to be you. I need it to be you. You're my ambassador. With just that word, you're my ambassador. Of course, you're my child, you're my son, but you're my ambassador. She gives back the dignity that was taken from the Spanish to all of the natives. She raises every single native to the position of child of God and equal with the Spaniards. And then the ambassador carries the words. He doesn't speak his words. He speaks the words of whoever sends him. She is the ambassador of God. She only speaks the words that God, she does the deed of God. So when Juan Diego is speaking, he's now the voice of God through an Indian. So Juan Diego, of course, doesn't reflect on these things. That's just me. So next day, through an Indian. So Juan Diego, of course, doesn't reflect on these things. That's just me. So next day, he goes home. Remember, 4 hours there, 4 hours back. So he goes home, Goes back next day and tells the bishop again everything he has seen and heard. The bishop, there was something nagging at the back of his head from the very first time that Juan Diego came with the first message. Everything Juan Diego was saying was theologically and Mariologically perfect. There is no error. So he asks, who is this Juan Diego? They tell him, well, he's a recent convert, he's a catechumen, he's been baptized, been married, he's a widower, grandfather, he's a good and honest man, he's a man who's respected in his community. That's all we know. I mean, that's enough. And then he asks, what's with Tepeyac? They tell him, well, there used to be a pyramid dedicated to Tonantzin Coatlicue. Remember the mother, the one with the snakes and the heads and the snakes and snakes and snakes? Her. She was worshipped there. And then the bishop thinks, now I get it. Someone wants me to build a Christian temple to a pagan goddess. Nah, that's not going to happen. So, he tells Juan Diego, bring me concrete proof that what you're saying is true, and I will build a church. To test him. He wants to know if Juan Diego is saying, this is a hoax, this has got to be a hoax. Why a church in the middle of nowhere, out on a dry, barren hill on the edge of the lake? And then, second, who is telling Juan Diego? He doesn't speak Spanish, he's only learning the Our Father. Who is telling Juan Diego to say all of the things he said? His worst fear is that it's actually one of his priests. Obviously, it would only be a theologian who can give these messages without a single mistake. So he wants to know if Juan Diego is in on this entire hoax, and he wants to get his hands on whoever is telling Juan Diego to spread these lies. So he tells Juan Diego, bring me concrete proof. Juan Diego does not hesitate, and he says, of course, I'll ask the Lady of Heaven. Absolutely. And then walks out. The bishop tells two of his guards, follow him. Whoever he stops to speak to, I want him. Bring him here. I want him here. And off goes Juan Diego, without stopping to talk to anyone, goes directly to Tepeyac. However, when he reaches the bridge that connects the causeway with dry land, he vanishes. He disappears. The guards look for him and thinking he's hiding somewhere. Then they see that there's really shrubs and nothing but small little plants, thistles, growing on the hill. And then there's no cave. There's obviously no trees. There's nowhere to hide. So they realize he disappeared. He vanished. They go back to the bishop. And they tell the bishop, do not believe him. He's a sorcerer. He's a liar. There's something very strange with this man. Don't believe a word he says. In the meantime, Juan Diego, unaware of what's going on, he goes to the top of the hill and tells Our Lady, the bishop wants proof. Our Lady tells him, okay, go home, get some rest. Tomorrow you come back for the proof for the bishop. Juan Diego goes home to Tepeyac and finds his uncle sick in bed, dying, with a fever, with a severe fever. So he gets the local medicine man, the shaman. The shaman tries to appease the gods, remember? Everything is punishment from the gods. So he tries to appease the gods. He spends the entire day with the ritual, and they knew medicine, they knew herbs, and they had some medicine. So he tries to heal, giving some comfort to the uncle, then realizes that the uncle there's nothing he can do. So he tells Juan Diego, be happy and rejoice because the God of the sun has the soul of your uncle in his clutches. I'm going to he had a fever, so it's fire. So he's going to take the soul of your uncle. He's going to take your uncle to fight. Juan Diego tells his uncle, prepare yourself for death. Juan Bernardino tells him, well, I don't want to die as a pagan. Get me a priest to hear my confession. So off goes Juan Diego headed for Tlatelolco to get a priest. But when he reaches the bottom of the hill, he's thinking he didn't show up the day before. So he has no time at the moment. He has to hurry before his uncle dies. So he decides to go around the back of the hill. She was always facing east. So he goes on the west, sorry, she was facing west. He goes on the east side of the hill. He goes around the back of the hill. Little does he know that mothers have eyes on the back of their heads. I mean, they know everything. They always know everything. So Juan Diego goes and he turns around and looks up at the hill and sees Our Lady walking down and starts to call him. He runs away, he starts to run. She appears at the base of the hill and cuts him off. He falls down on his knees and then starts explaining about his uncle's illness and why he hadn't shown, thinking she's going to go bzzzt, and that's it, I'm dead. The gods were revengeful. There was no mercy. You did something bad. You paid for it. And you paid for it bad. So Juan Diego's terrified. Or at least very afraid. So Juan Diego starts explaining this. And she tells him the most beautiful words we have from our Blessed Mother. Am I not here who am your mother? Are you not in the crossing of my arms, between the folds of my mantle, under my shadow and protection? The most beautiful image of comfort and consolation. While she's speaking to him, at the same time, she appears to the uncle, to Juan Bernardino, and heals him. She tells him, I am Santa Maria de Guadalupe. Go to the bishop and tell him everything that you have seen and heard. And restores him back his health. She tells Juan Diego, do not fear this or any other illness. Do not fear death. Do not fear. Your uncle is now healed. So the bishop, she tells Juan Diego, go to the top of the hill where we first met, and there you will find some flowers. Cut them and bring them to me. Juan Diego, absolute faith, without a single question, knowing that on December the 12th, on top of that hill, there's frost on the ground, and he's been there before. There's nothing growing on that hill. Still goes up and finds a garden of roses. Castilian roses, roses he's never seen before. They didn't grow in this continent. They're from southern Spain. The bishop was from southern Spain. So he picks the flowers, places them on his cloak, and brings them down. Our Lady arranges the flowers. She's the mother. She arranges the flowers. And tells Juan Diego, this is for the bishop, and the bishop alone. Okay, off goes Juan Diego to see the bishop. When he gets to the bishop's house, the guards are at the door. They ask him, what do you want? Or to see the bishop. Yeah, right, go, sit. He sits roughly about 4 hours. Not moving, not going anywhere. With the bundle. The guards look at him, realizing that they're not getting rid of him by ignoring him. They ask him, what do you have there? He says, well, nothing. Nothing for you. Yeah, right. So they pull back his arms, and they said they tried to grab the roses 3 times. But they later explained that it was as if the roses were embroidered or painted on the cloth. They could touch the cloth, but not the roses. Like a hologram. When you see a hologram, you see a 3-dimensional image, but if you try to touch it, you'll touch only the screen. Yeah, we play with holograms today all the time. They're quite common. Yeah, but this is the 16th century we're talking about. And they already think that he's a little bit of a sorcerer or something. They're already sort of skeptical about him at best. So they get terrified, they get scared. They start screaming and yelling and bust into the room where the bishop is holding audience. Of course, at the sound of the guards screaming and yelling, a group gathers to protect the bishop. Every time anyone was screaming, you would go immediately to defend because they were under constant attack. So a group gathers. They tell the bishop, he's back, and you better see him, tend to him. There's something strange going on with him. You'd see him now. Word to the wise, do not speak to the bishop that way. It's not a pretty picture. You're not gonna like it. Anyway, the bishop tells him, okay, let him in. Juan Diego walks in and says, I have the proof that you requested from the Lady of Heaven. The bishop tells him, okay, let's have it. When Juan Diego lets go of his cloak and the roses fall on the ground, the image appears on his cloak before the bishop and about 20 witnesses. Well, needless to say, the church was built. Juan Diego spent the last 17 years of his life telling the story to everyone and anyone who would come and listen. They began to arrive at the church, at the small chapel, by the thousands. He asked to be the one to sweep the church, to do the most humiliating job, which was actually to clean the dirt off the floor. He died in 1548. He was an incredibly holy man. After his death in 1548, somebody painted this man here, this is his signature. This native painted this in the tradition of the Indian scrolls, the native scrolls. We see the cathedral, we see sunrise, we see Our Lady of Guadalupe, we have Juan Diego, we see Tepeyac Hill, we see Juan Diego and Our Lady of Guadalupe. Our Lady of Guadalupe appears exactly as we see her here. She's exactly like that. There is Our Lady of Guadalupe. She says Guadalupe. She uses an Arab word, which translates as the river of light of love. But it's not exactly the river, it's actually the base of the river, the one that directs the river, that focuses the river of light of love. And the bishop, now, Our Lady of Guadalupe appears exactly as we see her here. She's exactly like that. There is Our Lady of Guadalupe. She says Guadalupe. She uses an Arab word, which translates as the river of light of love. But it's not exactly the river, it's actually the base of the river, the one that directs the river, that focuses the river of light of love. And the bishop.
Okay, so what I want to do is I wanted to stop there and just remind you that when he's talking about the base of the river, this is where I ended up with Labrador Sea. Do you remember that? It was the dog in the cloud, the picture in 2015. And this led me to the Statue of Liberty with the spikes, the spikes on her crown there. And that was meaning the seven seas. All right, so I found this very interesting, and it's something. This is something that would catch me and to keep going with this. Okay, so I really don't want to talk too much right now, but I just wanted to remind you that when he's talking about the name here, Guadalupe, and what it means in Arabic, Arab, I don't know. Sorry about that, but yeah, I couldn't believe it. I just thought, okay, I'm on the right track. So let's just keep going. I want to show you this here real quickly because I'm running out of time on this video.
Now, Our Lady of Guadalupe appears exactly as we see her here. She's exactly like that. There is Our Lady of Guadalupe. She says Guadalupe. She uses an Arab word which translates as the river of light of love. But it's not exactly the river, it's actually the base of the river, the one that directs the river, that focuses the river of light of love. And the bishop, now the crown, you might have seen images of Our Lady of Guadalupe with a crown, the crowned images. This was done shortly after the death of Bishop Zumárraga. He died in 1548, and so did Juan Diego. After the death, Bishop Montufa had authorized the painting. It was not an actual crown that was painted. It was actually just a diadem. Using the rays that were already there, they painted a diadem. In 1745, Mass and office was authorized for Our Lady of Guadalupe by the Pope, Benedict XIV. And this image she had the crown at that point. Miguel Cabrera accompanied, he was a painter. He's one of the most famous painters of Our Lady of Guadalupe. He accompanied the painting. He made a painting of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and at that point she had the crown. So that is why she's so widespread with the crown. But it's 1745. Yet, if we look at, we see here how where the crown used to be. What happened is the paint from the crown fell off, they painted it again. It fell off, they painted it a third time. The bishop at the time says, okay, I think she doesn't want a crown anymore, we stop painting. So the damage was done. We can see actually the damage. The tilma, Our Lady of Guadalupe, has no damage done by nature. All the damage on the tilma is man-made. Sorry to say. They used to rub metals and swords and different things. Here we have, in 1675, we have another scroll painted telling the story of Our Lady, and we see how there is no crown. In any one of the images that we see here, there is no crown. In 1548, we see no crown. So the crown, if you see a crowned image, the crown was added afterwards. It's not.
Okay, so when I heard him talking about how they tried to put a crown on the original image, I couldn't help. This just really screamed out to me. So what I'm going to do here is just read this out. And here, behold, the Lord hath a mighty and strong one, which as a tempest of hail and destroying storm, as a flood of mighty waters overflowing, shall cast down to the earth with the hand. The crown of pride, the drunkenness of Ephraim, shall be trodden under foot, and the glorious beauty which is on the head of the fat valley shall be a fading flower, and as the hasty fruit before the summer. In that day shall the Lord of hosts be a crown of glory, and for a diadem of beauty unto the residue of his people, and for a spirit of judgment to him that sitteth in judgment, and for strength to them that turn the battle to the gate.